Thank you for joining us this afternoon for Artist Exchange, a group created by artists for artists and art lovers. So grab your lunch and join us as we discover the work of two artists, Judith Selby Lang and Jane Ingram Allen. I'm Shelley Rugg, the gallery coordinator at Gallery Route 1. I would like to introduce our host, Pamela Blotner. Pamela Blotner is a Bay Area artist, curator, and educator whose sculptures and drawings explore humankind's relationship with belief, nature, and calamity. She has worked as a sculptor for the Houston, Texas Zoo and as an artist for Human Rights Watch, Physicians for Human Rights, Art for Conservation, and the Leatherback Trust. Blotner has also taught at colleges and universities throughout the US and exhibited her work at home and in Europe, Asia, and Africa. Please join me in welcoming Pamela Blotner.
Thank you, Shelley. Very nice. And I get the opportunity to introduce you to our guests, Jane Ingram Allen and Judith Selby Lang. And they are two artists who share a number of passions and a number of ideas. Both focus their attention on environmental issues such as pollution, waste, water conservation, and biodiversity. We like to introduce two artists for this program who are in some ways simpatico, but also do things a little bit differently. And so we hope that you will get a lot of information and a lot of ideas from our two guests today. Judith Selby Lang uses the plastic refuse she culls from beaches and transforms, as she says, these perils of pollution into something celebratory. Jane Ingram Allen begins by making handmade paper from local plant waste, then adds materials that contribute to a sustainable living and environment. Both artists will be featured in our upcoming Extraction, Art on the Edge, From Extraction to Restoration and Regeneration. That show will be in our GRO gallery. Okay, I would like to introduce Jane first, a little bit further, and tell you a little bit more about her, then turn it over to her to show you her work and to talk about her process. You can ask questions at the end of her conversation or when both artists have spoken. Okay, Jane Ingram Allen is a visual artist from Santa Rosa, California, where she lives there, whose love of place permeates her works. She was born in Delta, Alabama, and has been an artist in residence in several countries, including Japan, Brazil, Turkey, Taiwan, and Indonesia. She uses natural materials to create her environmental art products, beginning by making handmade paper from local plant waste, and then adding materials that contribute to sustainable living and improving the atmosphere, the environment. She says, "I like to work with nature as a partner. My works are sometimes map-based, and I call these works site maps because they are about my experience of a particular place and made from materials found in that place." Jane, what have you got for us today?
Okay, thank you everyone, and thanks to Shelley and Pamela for putting this program together. I think Shelley has my slide presentation ready to go up. Yeah, okay, so we'll just go directly into that. The first piece I'm showing here is called Global Warming, and I made it in 2003 as an artist in residence at the Delaware Center for Contemporary Arts. And as you can see on the left-hand side, whoops, we're going too fast. That one is when it was initially installed, and then the two pictures on the right show how it changes over time. And my idea with these works that include handmade paper and seeds for usually it's wildflowers that are native to that area is to have something transform over time with nature as a partner and contribute to the soil and to beautifying the place. Okay, next. Whoops, next. Okay, I also did several projects when I was a Fulbright Scholar Artist in Residence in Taiwan. In 2004, for Earth Day, I did this big project on the banks of one of the polluted local rivers to draw a map of that river and to pour blue pulp with seeds for blue wildflowers on the earth to create a living, blooming river of blue flowers in this park that was by the side of the river. And the next slide shows many people participating in this Earth Day art project. Okay, next. These slides show how it transformed over time. Since paper is a natural biodegradable material made from plants, it goes back into the earth as mulch, and then the seeds sprout and grow and bloom. Unfortunately, this one had a very bad sort of ending because it was in a public park and the people came in from the city to mow the lawn and didn't even recognize that it was an artwork. And so the flowers did start blooming, as you can see, but didn't last very long. Okay, next. I also did some indoor installations while I was in Taiwan to highlight the problem of the rivers in Taiwan, many of them polluted as rivers are all over the world now. And I also installed this in 2009 in New York City. And it's made with blue handmade paper that has seeds for blue wildflowers in it. And it's like a wall drawing. The one on the right is done on a mirrored wall. Okay, next. In 2013, after I moved back to the United States in the fall of 2012, I joined WEED, and then I participated in this exhibition at Los Medanos College, which is in Pittsburgh, one of the upper North Bay communities. And I made an installation called California Delta Rivers. And in it, I was mapping the rivers that contribute or come in to the bay from the California Delta. And you can see the Sacramento River coming down from the north and some of the rivers from the east. And Pittsburgh is about in the middle of this wall installation. Okay, next. I also did this installation again with some additions in 2014 at a gallery for Capital One Bank in San Francisco. And these are always a challenge because, as you can see here, we had a doorway to contend with, lots of pipes, and always light switches and other things to work around. And here I added the San Francisco Bay and part of the Pacific Ocean, and also the rivers that come in from the southeast and contribute to the fresh water for the city of San Francisco. And in these installations, I was highlighting the water. The land is not there. It's sort of the negative space to bring more public attention to the water and where our water comes from. Okay, next. For this extraction exhibition at Gallery Route 1 in September, I'm going to create a new piece that will highlight the waterways of Point Reyes, California. And this is a photograph I got from the internet. It's an aerial view showing Tamales Bay, and Point Reyes is at the bottom of the bay. And you can see there are not many streams or rivers um, on the peninsula, but many coming in from the coastal mountains and this long, narrow piece of Tamales Bay. So this will be a challenge to sort of draw out this map of the waterways of Point Reyes area for this exhibition. Okay, next. I've done lots of other works that concentrate on water because I think it's a very, of course, important and necessary element for life. And, this one was in particular about conservation of water. Every drop counts. And it was handmade paper water drops that had seeds for blue wildflowers in the pulp. And people who visited the exhibition were allowed to take one of these water drops and take it home, and if they wanted, plant it in their own garden so it would grow and produce blue wildflowers. Next. And I've been doing a series in the most recent years that I call Living Quilts. And this was one of those done in 2016 in Lancaster, California, to raise awareness about the local wildflowers and habitat preservation, and also to make something that contributes positively to the environment. And, handmade paper can act as mulch, and the seeds in the paper grow and sprout and bloom as wildflowers. And this was also a weed artist in residency project. And it was a California poppies quilt pattern. So it bloomed in these colors, the blue and the yellow, orange, and white. Okay, next. This is another bed, living quilt made in Newnan, Georgia, when I was an artist in resident there at a place called Newnan Art Res. And on the left, you can see the finished installation. And then on the right, some of the volunteers and children in the community helping to install it. It's installed on the grounds of a children's museum in Newnan, Georgia. And on the next slide, you can see it started sprouting in September of that year, and you can see some of the squares of paper still visible. And then on the right side, how it looks when it was blooming in spring of 2018. Okay, next. I also made a living quilt for the city of Santa Rosa, where I'm now based, and I did this in 2018. It was the year after the devastating wildfire fires in 2017 that destroyed many homes and many lives in Santa Rosa. It's in Rincon Ridge Park, and I used the flying geese traditional pattern because I thought it was a good sort of symbolic thing, being able to fly away and get away from the, when we made this installation, there was still lots of smoke in the air. You can see burned trees in the background, burned houses, no water at all in the park. Here's how it changed over time on the right-hand side. In the early spring of 2019, it was sprouting and growing. The next slide. On the left side, how it looked in 2019. This had to depend totally on the available rain because there was no way to water it. It did much better in 2020, as you can see on the right-hand side. We had many poppies blooming, also the blue wildflowers and some white ones. Okay, next. I did another quilt installation in 2019, working with a school in Sacramento, California. This was Natomas Charter School, which is the art uh, emphasis high school. And I worked with the students to make the squares and the borders and construct the headboard and footboard of local branches and place it on the ground on the prepared bed. We installed it in March of 2019. Okay, next. On the left side, you can see it's starting to transform and some of the plants coming up. And then in August 2019, many plants, the white cosmos seeds in the pulp sort of took over in August. Next. In 2020, I did an installation that was a different version of the California Delta Rivers, using the handmade paper and the string and sort of recycling some of the elements from other pieces. And this was done for the Weed exhibition honoring Joe Hansen, one of the founders of Weed. Okay, next. I also did an outdoor installation in Woodland, California at YOLO Arts. And this was again transforming handmade paper guns with seeds for wildflowers in them into living, blooming wildflowers. This is how it looked when it was installed. The next slide. Here it is transforming in April and then blooming in June of 2020. Okay, next. This is one I did in 2020 during the pandemic. I was an artist in residence that year for the city of Sacramento. And I hope they will continue this artist in residency project where they invite artists to work in a community and do a public art project. I did a quilt that was honoring Sojourner Truth, who was an escaped slave, imported in the abolitionist movement and also the movement for women's rights. And I used the North Star pattern because I read that that was a pattern that was used during the time of the Underground Railroad to point the way north. And here on the right, you can see some of the seeds sprouting and the paper dissolving. Next slide. Here's how it looked in 2021 in April when we went there to visit it. And there are many flowers still blooming. It's probably very dry right now. In California, we have to wait for the winter rains and the new life in the spring. Okay, next. During the pandemic year, I worked with an art center in Steckborn, Switzerland, and I made a handmade paper quilt that's in the Peaks and Valleys traditional quilt pattern. And I sent it to them because I couldn't go there during the pandemic. And I participated remotely via Zoom to help them install this quilt. And it's now blooming along the shores of Lake Constance in Steckborn, Switzerland. Okay, next. The most recent living quilt is in Nestucca Valley at the K through 8 school in Cloverdale, Oregon. And this living quilt was made during their summer youth program sponsored by Sitka Center for Art and Ecology. And we made an 8-foot by 10-foot quilt with a headboard and footboard and used a pattern that highlighted the 3 most pressing ecological problems there: water conservation, salmon conservation, and forest conservation.
I would like to introduce again Judith Selby Lang, who lives locally in Forest Knolls, California, and creates multimedia installations that explore the global impact of plastic and waste and pollution, while also creating positive symbols and life-affirming images. That's a hallmark of Judith's work, is that you come away with some optimistic feelings, which is great. As a child, she aspired to be a paleontologist. And every day after school, she writes, I would mine the white limestone cliffs in the woods near our house. And whenever she unearthed fragments of crustaceans and clam shells and whatever else she found, she went to the museum, the local museum, to try and identify them, often gazing into the specimen vitrines, and daydreaming about what it would be like to have several of her finds featured there in the museum with her name. And now, she says, fast forward some 55 years, and she is an artist, archaeologist, mining the beach in search for remnants of plastic, future fossils from the Pleistocene age. Okay, so to start off, Judith, how did you bring together your two loves, the art and the archaeology?
Oh, well, thank you for that wonderful introduction, Pamela. Thank you to WEED, to GRO, Gallery Route 1, and to the Extraction Project, all who through the years have done so much to support me and my work, and to continue through the various media, the various conversations that we've been fortunate to have. So I think I'm just going to jump right in with the slide. So if I could have my first slide, thank you so much. You just never know what you might find on the beach. What you're seeing here in this slide is one of the most pernicious pieces of plastic in the ocean, a ghost net. Maybe some of you have heard of them. There are these derelict pieces of fishing gear, rope, netting, monofilament line that gets tangled up, and it floats and sinks and floats and sinks in the ocean, and it ensnares marine mammals, fish, birds, wildlife of all kinds, and they're a devastation to the ocean. Not only are they somewhat invisible in the ocean, we don't see them, so most people don't know them. Next slide, please. They also wash up onto the beach, these massive weighted snarls of mess. They have, for me, become an incredible source of, you might say, free art materials, because in that unraveling, I have been able to discover many very unusual and exciting pieces of artwork. Next slide. Yep, next slide. Oh, there we go. Including, found on the beach, my husband, Richard Lang, who I'm happy to say was my very, very best find on the beach. And when we married, I fashioned my wedding ensemble all out of recycled materials, from pieces of plastic bag found on the beach, dry cleaner bags that I knitted to create that shawl, tiny bits of plastic sewn in embroidery-like into the skirt. And as I like to say, I wanted my marriage to be like plastic and last forever. And so far, so good. Next slide. When Lorna Stevens offered the opportunity to respond to this ostrich feather wedding dress, she invited 12 artists to be in receipt of this dress for a period of time in their studio, and then do something in response. The final exhibition to be showcased at Gallery Route 1. So next slide, please. And here is the incredible exhibition. What a wonderful show. And to me, a real testimony to the power of the creative spirit. We all had the wedding dress in our studios for about a week, and then look at the range of expressions that came out of this conversation with the dress. Next, please. It was my good fortune in that snarl, in that mess, to find this sort of fluffy and wonderful circle of delight that very much paralleled that cowl of the feather collar. Next slide, please. So in that was a perfect find. It looks like the rope is unraveling, and this looks like the ruff of feathers. And it was my great fortune to find that in that big mess. Next slide, please. Jo Hansen, co-founder of Women Eco Artist Dialogue, has long been an inspiration, and continues to be an inspiration. When we mounted the exhibition that Jane referenced at YOLO Arts, it was intended to be a legacy of Jo's many contributions, including her daily sweep. I was always inspired by, she made a daily sweep of the sidewalk in front of her house and gathered together the bits and pieces of labels and tickets and just the detritus of our lives. And she made it magnificent by mounting it into notebooks. Next, please. Next slide, please. To honor her sweeping, I swept together the many bits and tiny pieces of rope and multicolored pieces that Richard and I had found on Kehoe Beach in Point Reyes. And next slide, please. And created a lively installation at the YOLO Arts Gallery in Woodland. Next slide, please. And here you can see it with Jane's piece in the background. It was a wonderful, exciting exhibition and truly a great honor to be in proximity to the other weed artists and to have this opportunity to honor Jo in this way. Unfortunately, the show hit just at the time of the unrolling, the unraveling of the COVID, and so the show opened and closed in a blink. But using modern technology as we are here today, there were Zooms and ways that people could have virtual walkthroughs the exhibition. So we're all trying to find really creative ways to keep our work alive and gaining audiences internationally because of the use of the media. Next slide, please. When you think of fishing, you may think of a pole and a hook and maybe a creek, a stream, and the very simple action of fishing, pleasure. But these ghost nets, as I said, are devastating to the ocean. Not only do they capture unintended species, great amount of what's called bycatch, they also trawl along the ocean floor and scoop up everything, a devastation to the ocean floor. Next slide, please. But always intrigued by what kind of, you might say, unbearable beauty that I might find and make out of that devastation. In that pile, when asked to, when the call went out for the exhibition, the Gallery Route 1 extraction exhibition, thought, well, how can I speak to this really important issue of extraction by using what I have at hand? And again, I went back to that pile of netting and was able to myself extract out some very, what I find incredibly beautiful and lyrical knots, hawsers, ropes, and to present them in this very formal way as rarefied art objects. So it gives one this kind of cognitive dissonance between the horrible beauty, the horribleness of what these things represent and the incredible beauty of the shapes and the forms. And next slide, please. And then this is another of these, it's hard to tell the scale, but this thing is about 8 feet across and protrudes from the wall about 12 inches. And these knots are heavy, weighted, laden with, for me, laden with emotion as I think about the devastation that they call. And when I think of the journey of these ropes, so they were once at sea, at once perhaps productive as fishing gear, Then they got they got loose, they got left behind, they got ensnared in these ghost nets. And then they wash up onto Kehoe Beach, and Richard and I retrieve them. We bring it back, haul it back to our studios, and then go about this process of deconstructing this and trying to find what we can find. So I was very delighted to see these particular knots and to have them find their place within the extraction exhibition that will be coming up at Gallery Route 1. Next slide, please. So this past year has been fraught with many threats, COVID, variants, all of that. And as we know, there's been many cancellations and dislocations. But of late, a new threat has been bubbling up. It's like we're back to what to wear. During the COVID, Richard and I have been sheltering the whole time. Mostly, I wear the same thing every day, day after day. It's a good environmental strategy. You don't have to wash everything every day. But lately, I've been thinking about, oh, what do I wear to an extraction? What do I wear? So next slide, please. And of course, that snarl, that mess of rope has provided this incredible necklace, a true fashion statement. Who wouldn't want to be styling in something like this? It becomes, when I wear something like this out, which I look forward to going out again, people take note. It engages in a conversation, and instead of it being kind of a finger wagging, oh, and a depressing message about how terrible everything is, a fashion statement can certainly liven things up. And it gives me an opportunity to say, well, look what I found in this enormous, terrible ghost net that washed up onto Kehoe Beach, and look at this crazy beauty, this unusual fashion item. And that's what I'll be wearing to the extraction. So again, I want to thank everybody for this project and the opportunity to talk today with you all. Thanks so much.
Okay, I want to thank you both for being part of this project, but also for the inspiration. And now we know that we should plant gardens and make plastic dresses for this opening. Let me go ahead and ask my question, which is, either of you can speak to this first. What is the most enjoyable part of your art making process for you?
Okay.
I'll go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
For me, is in the surprise in the finding, to go to the beach not knowing if there will be any plastic, if there will be anything to be found, and yet there's always something surprising, something always is revealed. So not knowing and then stepping into that. So looking at that big pile of rope and discovering within it the great surprise of that feather, that the thing that was a semblance to a feather boa, or to find these great hawsers and knots that will be exemplary of the extraction process, or to find the elaborate curlicue of the necklace. So not knowing and just taking kind of, you might say, a leap of faith into the unknown, and having the confidence that something will be revealed.
Hi. I can relate to that too, not knowing. And in my work, that's also very important and very enjoyable. I put it out there in a very orderly, artistic fashion, I hope, but I never know what's going to happen. It's up to nature, and maybe some watering by the local people to see what happens over time. And also, I think for me, one of the enjoyable things is working with people in a particular place, in a particular community. And I work with all ages and, all cultures. And I've learned a lot from them in the sharing process of making something together. Okay.
Pamela, we have a question from Christina.
Very good. Christina.
Thank you. Yes, Judith, I was at the San Francisco Jewett Gallery extraction show,
Uh-huh.
yesterday. My
Oh,
phone.
wonderful.
And I loved your pieces, and I'm so curious. It looks like the plastic was somehow melted together. And was that something you did, or did that happen in nature?
No, that is how that is found. That is a new geological discovery. It's called plastaglomerate. It is plastic. Now, there's some scientific papers going around about this. There's discoveries being made in various locales. It's washing up. We have been finding, though they look like rocks, for everyone that doesn't know what we're describing, it looks like a melted rock. They are in the size and shape of rocks, but they can be very multicolored. In some of them, you can discern a little bit about maybe it was once a water bottle or there's a lid. When we first started discovering these, it's many years back, we just assumed that because at that time, so much of our trash was being shipped over to Asia, and incineration is a good portion of what they were doing to deal with our debris. That some of that got loose, and as we know, the great circular currents that connect us with Asia was bringing that debris back to our shores, because we find water bottles from all over the Pacific Rim. So that was our assumption. Now, there's some of the other people that are looking into this found a great number of these at Camilo Beach in Hawaii. And there's some thought that the plastic has melted in conjunction with volcanic action.
Oh,
The fire and the heat has melted the plastic. And then some people think it's just from campfires on the beach. Now that would seem to be an easy assumption, but say for example, at Kehoe Beach, it's very rare that there is a campfire allowed, it's by permit and so not so prevalent. So it's an open question. It's a wonderful question. And as we like to say, it will be the geological strata of our era. This era will be known as the Plasticine era because of the quantity of plastic, the layer that we are leaving as remnants behind here on this planet. So I'm so glad you went to see that show. Thanks.
wonderful show.
Thank you.
All right. I dropped some contact information for both Jane and Judith in the chat, so anyone can access that through the chat. And in the chat, we have a question or a comment from Terry. She says, environmental art can bring awareness, but can it affect change? Your thoughts, please.
That's a very good question. Yeah, I think, art can contribute positively to the environment and to, changes. I try to do that in a very small way with these projects that change, that are not permanent, that go into the earth and come back as living plants. But, some of the environmental art we make is probably going to end up in the landfill or encourage more consumerism or, that sort of thing. It's a good question. What can artists do that will actually bring about change? And I think one of the things is, involving education. It's change only comes about when people are aware of something. And so by raising awareness, it does, in a way, affect change. What do you think, Judith?
I just wanted to, I realized that I didn't say enough about the library show. The San Francisco Public Library main branch has an exhibition of artist books, as does the San Francisco Center for the Book. Both of those exhibitions are related to the extraction theme. And everyone that's interested in this, from the GRO exhibition, The Weed, should take a look at extractionart.org. It's a multi-international exhibition. And to me, it's a really just an incredible upwelling of energy around this theme of extraction. And to me, it's an indication that art artists are feeling like they have the power. And it's what else can we do, but we have to get out there. And as Peter Koch, the co-founder of Extraction Art, says, we just got to make a ruckus.
I have a question. I also find things. I'm right now working on a panel for a time machine with used watches and things that everybody's throwing away. But my question, I'm really interested in the practicality of how you store all this stuff, the stuff that's been made and all your materials, because I know Judith especially has a huge load to store.
It's true. Well, none of this would be possible if Richard and I didn't have a very large barn. We have a barn, and as I say, it would not be possible. And it's quite a remarkable site because we have boxes and boxes of plastic in every color and kind, sorted according to categories, so that when we're called upon to create an installation or an artwork, we can just go and pull out a box, and up here we are, we're ready to go. So yeah, but it's a problem. It's a big,
I bet.
it's a big problem.
I
And
thought I
especially
had trouble.
we hold on to everything because we don't want it going back into the waste stream.
Right.
We actually recycle our plastic. We'll use it in one project and then bring it back and then use it again. So we actually are recycling our own materials.
I'd like to speak
And
to
thank
that.
you so much for
Yeah.
doing that.
Just to say a little bit more about that issue of, storing and, taking care of your art materials. That's one of the reasons that I decided at this stage I would make work that is temporary and goes back into the earth. And I don't have anything to store. I maybe keep a sample of it, and then it goes back into the earth and comes back as living, blooming plants. Okay.
Yeah, that's
Jane, have you
Thanks.
ever made a garden with edible parts? And what was that like?
Yes, I have. I've done some installations that were focused on birds and also some focused on pollinators and using seeds in the paper pulp that the birds can eat. And the site of the installation becomes a great place for watching birds because they come and eat the seeds that are embedded in the handmade paper nest-like constructions. And I've done those all over the world in different places. And then, for pollinators, you can, grow the type of wildflowers that provide habitat and food for butterflies, bees, and other pollinators. Okay.
I'll have to try that.
Any other questions?
There's a comment from Jamie Tabak in the chat. She says, I appreciate the relationship between the two artists. Judith's work is about what has and is happening, and Jane's work is dealing with the future of our planet.
wonderful.
Yeah, in this WEED Women Eco Artists Dialogue Artists Show at Gallery Route 1, I was most interested in the sort of end of their title, emphasizing regeneration instead of extraction, which is a very negative thing. And, how we can regenerate, bring new life to this planet. Okay.
If you think you'd like to present as an artist at a future Artist Exchange event, send an email to Pamela, PamelaBlotner@gmail.com. If you were moved by today's presentation and want to support the work that Gallery Route 1 does to bring art to the community, then please visit our website at galleryroute1.org and donate today. Make a note in the comments section that your donation is because of our Artist Exchange event. Thanks again, everyone, for coming, and be sure to save the chat if you want it. We'll see you next time.